During the 1950s, 60s and 70s, a number of people that resided on the island of Jersey were attacked by a mysterious man. This man would be dubbed as the Beast of Jersey. The Beast of Jersey would strike fear into those on the island due to a string of terrifying offences, only striking when he knew his victims were vulnerable. The island of Jersey is the largest of the Channel Islands and is located between England and France, with a population of 55 to 70,000 during the period I'm about to discuss. The island is known to be an incredibly scenic and beautiful place to live with low crime rates, and is famous for its ice cream. It was even occupied by the German forces in World War II. A big thank you to Babbel for sponsoring today's video, the app that helps you start learning a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And with my code, you can get 65% off. The lessons on Babbel are built by over 150 real-life language teachers, unlike other apps that just use AI technology. What I love about Babbel is that it teaches more than just the words. It teaches you about the language's culture, the people, the history, slang words, and so much more. And the people that have used Babbel have had great results. The app can get you speaking a new language in 3 weeks with just 10 to 15 minute lessons per day.
Il cane.
Il cane. Oui.
There are also a number of ways to learn. As part of your subscription, you'll get games, live classes, and podcasts. One of my dreams in life is to move to Italy for a year or two, and it's something that I'm actually planning. So thanks to Babbel, I've been able to learn some of the fundamentals, and of course, there's nothing cooler than being able to speak multiple languages. So go ahead and click that link in the description or pinned in the comments to get an incredible 65% off your subscription, and get learning a new language today. And Babbel also comes with a 20-day money-back guarantee. So thank you to Babbel for supporting independent creators on YouTube, and now, onto the video. In November of 1957, a woman was waiting at a bus stop for her ride home late at night. This woman was a nurse and was just minding her own business, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she was attacked. The attacker tied a rope around her neck and dragged her from the bus stop into a nearby field. The attacker beat and forced himself upon her. After he had committed this despicable act, he fled from the scene. The woman was badly injured and required a number of stitches. The woman reported the crime to the police, but the attacker had left behind little evidence, and he had also concealed his identity by covering his face with a scarf. The police didn't have too much to work with. A piece of evidence she was able to provide was that this man had a strange Irish accent, almost like he was putting it on. This attack would be but the start. The next year, in March of 1958, the attacker would strike again. Another woman was walking home from a bus stop when a man jumped out, wrapped a rope around her neck, and dragged her into a field. She too suffered the same fate as the previous victim. Then, a couple of months later in July, another woman walking home from a bus stop was attacked. A rope was tied around her neck, she was dragged into a field, and she too became a survivor of SA. An obvious pattern began to emerge. With 3 attacks taking place within a short period of time, residents became greatly concerned. And then, in August of 1959, another woman was attacked, but thankfully, she was able to fight him off, resulting in him running from the scene. It was clear to the investigators that these attacks were linked. All the survivors described the attacker having a musty odour, a fake Irish accent, and seemed to be around 40 years old, with their signature being the rope around the women's necks. The police also found empty cigarette cartons at the crime scenes. The fact these numerous attacks were still unsolved seemed to have somewhat emboldened the Beast of Jersey. He changed his strategy to include some other methods. At first, it was the people alone in the streets that were in danger, but this was no longer the case. During the 60s, he began breaking into people's houses. On the 14th of February 1960, a 12-year-old boy was awakened by a bright torch shining in his eyes. Stood at the end of his bed was the Beast of Jersey. He tied a rope around the boy's neck, dragged him into a field, and forced himself upon him. After, he brought the boy back outside his house and fled from the scene. An investigation of the crime scene concluded that the Beast of Jersey had climbed through his window to get inside. Then, in March of 1960, a 25-year-old woman was walking to a bus stop when all of a sudden, a man who claimed to be a doctor pulled over and offered to give her a lift. This man said he was on his way to pick up his wife, which led the woman into a false state of security, and she accepted the ride. Once inside the car, the man grabbed her, tied her up, and beat her before dragging her into a field and forcing himself upon her. The man inside the car was indeed the Beast of Jersey. After he was done, the Beast grabbed the woman and dragged her back inside the car and drove away with her. However, the woman managed to escape from the vehicle and screamed as loud as she could for help. As a result, the Beast fled and sped off from the scene. Soon after this, the Beast would strike yet again. A 43-year-old woman was home with her 14-year-old daughter. The two lived in a fairly remote part of the island. At around midnight, their phone rang. The mother got up and went to answer the phone. On the other end, there was only a strange clicking sound. Not thinking too much of it, the woman put down the phone and went back to bed. But then moments later, there was a noise downstairs, followed by the lights in their home going out. She tried to call the police, but the phone lines had been cut. The Beast of Jersey was inside her home. The woman was then grabbed in the dark. She was able to fight the Beast off and ran to her neighbors for help. But as she ran for help, the Beast had gone upstairs and grabbed her daughter instead and forced himself upon her, following the exact same ritual with the previous attacks. The following month, another incident took place. This incident would be the first time that the Beast of Jersey would wear his now infamous mask. A 14-year-old girl was asleep when she was awakened by the sound of someone in her room. She sat up, opened her eyes to see the Beast stood at the end of her bed, staring at her. Terrified, the girl screamed, and thankfully, the Beast fled before harming the girl. In the following months, the Beast of Jersey continued his reign of terror using this method. From July 1960 to April 1961, he attacked and committed SA upon 4 children aged between 8 and 12. All were abducted from their homes and taken to a field. With over 3 years of sinister and brutal attacks on women and children, the police acquired help from Scotland Yard to help crack the case and bring the Beast of Jersey to justice. A detective by the name of Jack Manning was assigned to the case, a well-respected homicide detective from Scotland Yard. The police questioned thousands of people, including already known criminals on the island. The information the police had on the Beast of Jersey was that he was around 5'6", an average build, spoke in a strange accent, had a strange musty smell, sported a mustache, and always wore a long jacket or raincoat with a peaked cap and gloves. And of course, the mask. The Beast had also claimed that he had killed someone. He had mentioned this to a couple of the victims. Islanders were told to stay alert, especially during the hours of 10 PM to 3 AM, as this was when the Beast was known to strike. Neighborhood watches were created as a deterrent, in hopes it would minimize the chances of the Beast of Jersey striking again. Jack Manning also collaborated with the press, and with each issue of the paper, a toolkit was given to help the residents to track down the Beast. These measures seemed to work, at least for a little bit. The investigators also requested fingerprints from every man on the island. The men could deny this request, but every single man complied but 13. Instead of chasing up these 13 people, the police turned their attention to a man named Alphonse. Alphonse was an older gentleman and a recluse. He was known to roam the island at night, and he also owned a raincoat. These factors were enough for him to arouse suspicion. Alphonse was questioned by the police and his home was searched numerous times, but it came clear to the police that it was highly unlikely that he had anything to do with the crimes. However, the residents on the island believed that Alphonse was the one responsible, and so they took matters into their own hands. They burned his house down. Now homeless and in danger of being attacked or even killed by the furious islanders, Alphonse was forced to flee. He lived in exile on a small island 7 miles away from Jersey. For 2 years, there were no attacks, but islanders would soon regret their cruel treatment of Alphonse, and the attacks would soon continue. In April of 1963, the Beast of Jersey attacked a 9-year-old boy. Residents were horrified. They believed the nightmare to be over. And then, in November of the same year, an 11-year-old boy was attacked, followed by 2 attacks on a 10-year-old girl and a 16-year-old boy. And then, nothing. Nothing else happened for more than 2 years, leading to the police to believe that the beast was no more. But this was wishful thinking. A chilling letter was sent to the police, and the sender claimed to be the beast himself. My dear sir, I think that it is just the time to tell you that you are just wasting your time, as every time I have done what I always intended to do, and remember, it will not stop at this, but I will be fair to you and give you a chance. I have never had much out of this life, but I intend to get everything I can now. I have always wanted to do the perfect crime. I have done this, but this time, let the moon shine very bright in September, because this time, it must be perfect. Not 1, but 2. I am not a maniac by a long shot, but I like to play with you people. You will hear from me before September, and I will give you all the clues, just to see if you can catch me. Yours very sincerely, Wait and See. The Beast of Jersey followed through with his promise in the letter. In August of 1966, a 15-year-old girl was attacked by the Beast of Jersey. He beat and forced himself upon her. He also made some incredibly disturbing threats. The girl reported that he repeatedly said, "Do you know how long it takes to kill a woman? 5 minutes." The other attack that the Beast promised never happened. Following this attack, the Beast went quiet again and would reappear in the 70s. In August of 1970, a 13-year-old boy was asleep when he was awakened by a bright light shining directly into his face. He led the boy outside and attacked him in his usual style. After, the Beast of Jersey brought the boy back home, but told him that if he was to speak to anyone about what happened, he would come back and kill his parents. The following morning, the boy woke up and tried his best not to speak of what happened to him, but his parents could obviously see that something was horribly wrong with him. He broke down and told his parents exactly what happened. By this point, the Beast of Jersey had been carrying out his depraved crimes for well over a decade. The police had interviewed and questioned thousands of people, yet they just couldn't seem to crack the case. And then, a rather unusual stroke of luck. On the 10th of July 1971, 2 police officers were conducting their nightly duties and patrolling around the island in a car. The officers stopped at some traffic lights when a car whizzed by them at great speed. The officers were quick in pursuit. Whoever was in this car desperately tried to evade the police and even drove on the wrong side of the road to get away from them. And then, the car crashed. The man in the car tried to run, but the officers were able to catch him and he was taken back to the police station. In the heat of the pursuit, with adrenaline running high, it was only back at the station that the officers realized the gravity of the situation. They noticed that the man they had just arrested was wearing a very similar trench coat that the victims had reported the Beast of Jersey to wear, and it had a very distinct musty smell. He was also wearing bands around each wrist that had large nails protruding from them. Upon searching his pockets, they discovered that his jacket was lined with spikes. They also made a very chilling discovery. They removed a flashlight, a wig, and the haunting mask of the Beast of Jersey. The man they had arrested was Edward Pennell. Edward was a 46-year-old man born and raised on the island of Jersey. He was a married man with a daughter and 2 stepchildren. Edward met his wife Joan at a foster home for children founded by her mother. Edward worked there as a kind of handyman. It's reported that he was very well loved by the children there. He brought them gifts and sweets and dressed up as Santa, and they even referred to him as Uncle Ted. Edward and Joan were married but weren't really together. The two didn't get along and they weren't intimate, so Edward lived in an annex on the side of their home. The police, of course, had a long list of questions for Edward to answer. They knew very well they had the Beast of Jersey in custody, they just needed to prove it without a shadow of a doubt. Edward refused to answer the police's questions about his mask, outfit, and what he was doing that night. When they pushed that they knew he was the Beast of Jersey, he just replied, "Prove it." The police searched Edward's home for clues. They searched the annex attached to the side of his house and entered his bedroom. During the search, the police discovered a disturbing hidden room. Inside the room were multiple wigs, masks, and raincoats that were covered in various bodily fluids. When the police entered the room, it's reported they were hit with a strong musty smell. Photographs of the victims' houses covered the walls of the hidden room. It was clear that Edward had put a great deal of thought into every single attack he carried out. He knew the homes very well, where best to gain entry and when best to strike. He also kept the photographs as some kind of trophy. Inside this secret room, the police also found an altar covered with books on the occult and black magic, with multiple ritualistic items, including a wooden sword hung on the wall. It is also said that he would perform animal sacrifices on the altar before going out on his attacks. Edward was not a smoker, nor did he have an Irish accent. He had left behind empty cartons of cigarettes at the crime scenes and faked the accent in an attempt to throw off the police. Edward was charged and the trial would begin in November of 1971. The prosecution team brought up Edward's obsession with the occult. They also highlighted that he had a very strange fascination with Jules de Rais, and even claimed to be one of his descendants. Jules was a Frenchman who lived during the 1400s. He lured hundreds of children into his castle and would sacrifice them to Satan, and he is said to have summoned a demon. The story of Jules de Rais is perhaps a story for the Disturbing History Channel one day. The prosecution team also presented how carefully Edward planned his despicable acts on the victims, showing his hidden room with the photographs of the victims' homes and the Satanist paraphernalia. Earlier in this video, I mentioned that out of all of the men on the island, only 13 refused to give fingerprints to the police. Well, it turned out that Edward was one of those 13 men. Frustratingly, if the police would have pursued this just a little further, the beast could have been caught long before. But the only previous conviction Edward had was from the time of Nazi occupation on the island. Edward had stolen food belonging to the Nazi forces and distributed it to the hungry locals. He was caught and imprisoned for months. Perhaps they didn't think that such a man was capable of committing such extreme levels of evil. Edward was also a well-liked man on the island and was known for taking part in many community events, and of course for helping his wife with the foster home she ran. Many were shocked that he turned out to be the Beast of Jersey, leading him to being dubbed as a real-life case of Jekyll and Hyde. Edward was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Following his arrest and conviction, his wife Joan wrote a book on the Beast of Jersey in 1972, claiming that she had no idea that her husband was the Beast. Although she tried to back up her claims and stated that they were only married in name and not very intimate with each other, many did not believe her story. Alphonse, the man whose house was burned down, lived in exile for 14 years on a small island inhabited by fishermen and tourists. He declared himself the king of the island and enjoyed his time there. He did, however, eventually return to the island of Jersey. He passed away at the age of 97 in 2012. And now, get ready for something that will truly infuriate you. Edward was released from prison in 1991 after completing 20 years of his 30-year sentence, as he was considered to be a model prisoner and was even allowed to return to Jersey. Of course, the residents of Jersey had not forgotten the terror he had inflicted upon them, and so he was forced to flee the second they found out. He lived on the Isle of Wight for the rest of his days, dying in 1994 from a heart attack. Though Edward was only charged with 13 counts, it's believed that there were more victims that just didn't come forward. Some victims would later come forward, and it was those living in the children's home ran by his wife Joan. A 2008 investigation on the children's home called Operation Rectangle found that some of the children recalled Edward climbing through the windows at night, wearing his mask and gloves to attack them. One witness confirmed that he used chloroform on sleeping children and removed them from their beds to perform his sadistic acts elsewhere. The documents of this investigation, which total more than 2,000 pages, were published online, but many of the potential witnesses are now dead or those that were unwilling to give live evidence. The allegations in the documents also point to high-profile 1960s politicians, and also point to a potential ring and many cover-ups. They also dug up shackles in the dirt, which would have been attached to the walls. Despite the allegations made against Edward in the investigation, there was no firm evidence to prove that he was responsible for any of the SA that occurred in the foster home for children, although of course it's highly likely, if not certain. There is also an unsolved murder that occurred on the island of Jersey in 1966. Tula Hook was a 20-year-old woman who worked in Jersey in the summer of 1965. After her studies, she returned in the summer of 1966. She fell in love with the island and wished to make a home there. At around 7:30 on the 30th of December 1966, Tula went to catch a bus to see some friends. She got to the bus stop and was seen by a number of people driving by, but she never actually made it onto the bus. Tula's body was found the following morning on the 31st of December. Her head and face had been caved in with some kind of heavy object. It's thought that she had accepted a lift from someone, and that someone could be the one responsible. Was the Beast of Jersey responsible for this murder? It certainly fits his style. A woman waiting at a bus stop is reminiscent of many of his attacks. And of course, he did tell a number of his victims that he had killed somebody. Many have speculated that the Beast of Jersey could have been the one responsible. But as of now, the case remains unsolved. The Beast of Jersey is quite possibly one of the most terrifying cases I have come across. The outfit he wore is reminiscent of something out of a modern-day horror film. And despite not being convicted of a murder, I think it's safe to say that Edward is quite possibly one of the worst people to ever exist.